It's a hidden gem. I think it's a hidden gem in, in the GTA, and I stumbled across it, and I'm so grateful that I did.
In Oakville, Ontario, west of Toronto, in a beautiful historic farmhouse, there's a small co-ed school that at least one family calls a hidden gem. Clanmore Montessori School teaches kids from the toddler years through to grade 8, with a Montessori approach that Sheridan McLelland says was eye-opening. Sheridan was moving from the UK with her family and came to Clanmore in search of childcare for their youngest. In the end, they enrolled 4 kids at Clanmore, and for Sheridan, it was all about the approach to education they found there. An approach, she says, is all about respect. Sheridan, your son in grade 7. Tell me about who he is as a person and as a student.
So his name's Joseph. He's been at Clanmore since he was 3. So he started in the first year of CASA. It's his second home. He's got a lot of good friends there, and he enjoys going. He misses it. It's summer. He's missing his friends. He's missing the community there.
You said he's been there since CASA. How does that compare to his siblings' experience? Is he the one who's been there for the longest part of his education so far?
Yes. So we initially thought that Joseph would just be there for the early years. But there are a few things that really stuck out with the school that we loved, and within the year we'd brought our other 3 girls over from their original schools over to Clanmore.
What was it that brought about this turnaround?
So first of all, the school was recommended to us, and I didn't really know much about Montessori at the time, and I went with this recommendation. And the first thing that put my mind at rest was Joseph was quite reluctant to go into the classroom at first, so she just sat us on a sofa and just outside the room, and didn't pressure him to go in. And over the week, we were able to wait on the bench, and then he would go in when he was ready. And it was a very smooth transition, and I just liked that they didn't force us into that, like taking him away and tears. And it was in his own time, and I really felt that they respected him and my kind of parenting style with that. And while I was sat on the sofa with my son, the sofa was actually outside the upper elementary classroom, and I just saw some amazing things going on there that also made me think, that this is something different. I want to learn more about Montessori and see how it could work for our family.
Do you remember what you were seeing and hearing from that classroom as you waited outside?
I do, yes. So I saw, so there were upper elementary children, so they're ages 9 to 12. And I saw a teacher facilitating the classroom. She wasn't stood in front of the classroom, and the children were working in groups, totally engaged in their work, and they were all working on different projects. And to me, that was just a fascinating way to work. But they were all so engaged in what they were doing, and there was, it wasn't chaotic. It was pretty quiet in that room, and sometimes I would see a child lead the class. So she would be at the front of the class talking to her peers, and I just liked that it wasn't teacher led, it was child led, and the teacher was facilitating.
And Sheridan, correct me if I'm wrong, you were saying you're sitting there with your youngest son, but this is your first experience with the school, and it was later that you brought your older children over to Clanmore. Right.
Yes.
Tell me about where you were at as a parent and as a family in those days. Was school a problem that you were trying to solve, or were you just taking a recommendation and seeing what came of it? Or where were you at as a family and as a parent?
Yeah, so my girls were at an all-girls school. We were fairly new to Canada. We'd only been here for a year from the UK, and they were they were settling in. We'd moved, from overseas. And I needed to find childcare for my young son, who was 3. So this recommendation came up, and when we saw what we saw, it just seemed like the right thing to do for us as a family, and we've never looked back. It was the right decision for us. It was a step out, because we were used to, my schooling was very much, we were graded. It was a very traditional school, and that's all I knew. And so this really was a leap of faith for us as a family.
Tell me about what your kids knew up until this point. Coming from the UK, what were the things, the hallmarks of their education, the good and the bad, that you were using as your basis point?
Right. Well, they were traditionally educated, especially coming from the UK. It was just a very different. It was led by, they were given work to do. So initially, my oldest daughter struggled with she was used to being handed work. And she liked that. She liked but she didn't really have to think about, what she was going to do next. And that's the key difference, I think, with Clanmore and Montessori education, is that the child is really part of the education process. And that, I think, is one of the key things.
Tell me about, what changes did you see in your kids in their first months at Clanmore?
So I saw they made lots of friends for a start, and they enjoyed going to school. They were, they wanted to be there, and they were happy to be there. They were engaged. A little bit of difference with my older daughter. She was more, there was a bit of resistance, but we stuck with it, and she eventually got used to it. It probably took 6 or so months for her to understand what was, the difference between her traditional schooling and where she was now.
Sheridan, we talked a bit earlier about the things that won you over. What won your kids over to Clanmore?
I think there are a few things. They don't have homework. They don't have tests. Really, both of those until the middle school. So my kids were younger at the time, so that was fantastic for them. They go on brisk walk. There's a conservation area just behind the school, and they utilize that quite a lot, and that was fun for them as well. It was very interactive. Lots of group work. They could really focus on what they were interested in, what they wanted to do, rather than being given work. And I think for that, with that all of that combined really sold them on the school.
You mentioned the conservation area in the backyard. Tell me more about the physical space. When you first walk onto the property, what are you seeing? What are you hearing and smelling?
Yeah, so aesthetically it's a lovely place. It's an old farmhouse, and it has a big extension on it. Like I say, they utilize the conservation. There's a creek behind, a wooded area with a creek. The children go on a brisk walk 3 times a week. Once a month, the parents are invited as well. So that's really nice for me, and especially when my children were new to the school, that was nice that I could come along too and be part of that. Yeah.
So how long has it been since that first time you were sitting on that bench outside the classroom?
It's been 7 years. Yeah.
Are there any ways in which your relationship with the school has evolved over that time? Things that you've come to appreciate later that weren't maybe apparent at first?
I would say so. I at the time, I didn't realize how they valued and respected the children. I'd got an inkling of that, but I didn't realize how far they took it in as much. So, for example, if a child has an altercation with another child, they, neither child is in trouble. They're not they're not blamed for what's happened, but they're guided through fixing it. So there's a lot of respect for the individual child and for individuality. So all shapes and sizes, you know, whoever you are, there's good in you, and they will find that.
Sheridan, you were saying that at the outset, Montessori wasn't something you went looking for. It was something that was recommended to you in the form of Clanmore. What does Montessori mean to you now?
I think to me, Montessori is it's a respect for the child, a respect for the world, and it's self-growth of each individual child.
What is it that makes it hard to find the essence of what Montessori and that approach means?
Yeah, so I think if you're just looking for academics, then it's not necessarily the school for you, because you won't go to the school, you know, for a viewing day and see children sat behind a desk studying for all of their time. It's much more interactive and it's much more subtle. It's child, you know, it is child-led, so there is a degree of freedom in that. Having said that, you know, you'll go into the school and you'll, you know, perhaps go into a different room and see two children working away because they needed peace and quiet, and they're working on their, you know, on their whatever they're doing. It's really quite fascinating to see. That's what blew me away, actually. One of the things that did blow me away was, you know, seeing that they were so motivated to do their work. But, you know, perhaps if you've got a child who isn't used to finding their own work, it could be a struggle at the beginning. You know, as my daughter struggled with that at the beginning, she wanted to be fed work, and it took a while for her to understand that she'll be guided, and she has a responsibility to work, but it's coming from her too.
You know, Sheridan, I can't help but think of, when we all grow up, there's generally there stops being that person who gives us work to do and gives us assignments to complete and gives us reasons to be motivated and driven towards getting those things done. We have to grow up and find our own reasons and our own motivations. With thinking of that, what does the Montessori approach mean for developing that future adult?
I think this really does instill that inner drive for learning. I think learning this way, you know, it sets people up really well for the world, for their future. Yes.
Sheridan, thinking of, you know, you have 4 different kids who went to this school, yes, and no doubt they're all quite different as students. How did Clanmore give each of those kids what they needed as a student?
Yeah, so you're right. They're all very different personalities and different abilities. You know, different. They have different issues, they're different needs, that, you know, their needs have been met one way or another. It has actually suited all 4 of them, interestingly.
May I challenge you to give us an example of a way that, you know, one child was very different from the other, but the same school could serve both of them?
Yeah, so I have one. Well, you know, they all have their qualities, my children, and one of them, you know, is very quiet, and she has identified learning challenges, and the school have been, you know, readily worked with her, and you know, she's thriving in high school now, which is really lovely for me to see. You know, academically she's doing very well. Yeah, I don't know whether I can. Oh, and I have another example of one of my daughters who made a mistake at the school, and you know, needed to fix it. So the way she actually broke a window, and and rather than being shamed, she was asked to come in on the weekend. So she had to, take time off of her tennis lesson that she really loved, and fix the window. And she went with one of the owners to Home Depot, and they fixed the window, and she made amends. But she also, now years later, I see her in the garage doing woodwork, and I say, do you want me to help you with the saw? I'll teach you how to use it. But she already knows.
She went with the owner of the school to Home Depot.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yes.
And was there an element of that kind of, handyman woodworking you mentioned, or that kind of stuff? Was there a handiwork element of what they do at the school?
Certainly in the middle school, and they will invite experts in as well, to help with that if they don't have somebody within the staff. But yes, yeah.
So often we think classroom and we think pencils and notebooks. Are there other examples of things your kids have done along the way at Clanmore, like handiwork and woodworking that we might surprise those watching?
Yeah, so the school have a garden, so they grow vegetables, which they have to start from scratch. It's a process, and they need to prepare the ground, and so they end up with the fruits of their labor at the end of the season. Yeah, they run a cafe, and on one morning a week, the middle school, and they're responsible for the funding it, but they take the bus to the grocery store. They buy their provisions and they market it, and they serve. It's pretty simple. It's coffee or tea and one breakfast a week, but they clean up, they serve, they cook. It's amazing, and it's lovely for the parents, because we congregate there every week, and enjoy their delights.
Have you had a moment, thinking especially of your daughters who have left Clanmore, have you had any moments with them where you see them do something or react to something, and you're just like, wow, they learned that at Clanmore?
Well, the example I gave with my daughter in the woodwork is one. Another is they're all very capable of cooking. They, from a very early age, from CASA, they're starting to do the washing. They'll go collect the laundry from the different classrooms and put the washing machine on. So my son at eight years old, and all of my children actually were doing their laundry at a young age. They're perfectly capable. They're very used to cleaning up after themselves as well, because that is another responsibility that they are taught when they're at Clanmore, that they have to put something away before they get something new out. Yeah.
Sheridan, if I were to ask you to rank your 3 favorite things about this school, what would those be?
I think it's a very caring community. I think there are lots of like-minded families at the school who, who do appreciate what the school are doing and understand that it's different, but it's valuable. I like how they're free. It's a safe place to make mistakes for the children. So, there's no blame and there's no shame, but they're guided through fixing their mistakes. And I think that is a valuable lesson for them that we as parents can support too. I've learned a lot as well.
Tell me more. What have you learned through your family's experiences at Clanmore?
I think more on the, on the fixing mistakes and not blaming. Yeah.
Well, but that's a really interesting thought. Let's unpack this. As a, that's a fixing mistakes, not blaming. That's a philosophy that goes to how we interact with everyone around us, how we carry ourselves as parents. What has it taught you?
I think just to step back and, you know, see that there are always two sides to, you know, a disagreement, and try and, you know, trying to hear the other side, hear what they have to say and why they made those decisions, because sometimes it doesn't make sense as an adult why, you know, my child would do something, but when you hear it from their perspective, it suddenly makes a little bit more sense, and it makes us more empathetic and understand why they were perhaps motivated to do something, and it gives an opportunity to, you know, help them work through it, but not from anger, from love.
How different is that to what you were used to, you know, maybe in the UK or in other schools, having such a strong component that's about, you know, emotional intelligence, social development, and that other side of the student? How different is that to what you had experienced previously?
It is totally different. You know, usually, you know, certainly in my schooling, I was, you know, I would have been sent to the head teacher, or I wasn't, but I could have been had I not, you know, behaved. So there just wasn't the understanding, I don't think, of children's motivations. And what I notice at the school is they really have a good understanding of the different stages of development. So they'll expect less from a young child and more from an older child. But they do hold them accountable, and I love that, you know, they do that, and you know, work with them to fix that mistake. So it's certainly something that wasn't apparent when I was at school.
Switching gears a bit, what's something you've seen Clanmore work to improve over these years your family's been there?
I think communication, you know, and listening to parents' feedback, I think that has improved. That's a very tricky situation, because they want the children to fix their mistakes. You know, it's not necessarily, you know, the parents perhaps want more information if their child has been wronged. So it's a very, you know, I see that it's sensitive, but I think the school have responded to that wish.
So you're talking about, you know, if a situation happens in the classroom and the school is kind of caught between the pressures of our philosophy of having the kids resolve it, but also the normal expectations of parents to be kept in the loop, to have a clear picture, you know, the kid's coming back at the end of the day and sharing that story, and the parent wants to know what's going on, and the school has to do this balancing act.
Yeah, that's right. Yes, it can be easy, but and you know, I know, I think you know, they're responsive. So you know,
Have you seen them take on specific initiatives in terms of communication? You know, maybe it's not an altercation, maybe it's like a regular update, or what do they do to make you, the parents, feel in tune with the community and part of it?
So I think, you know, if we ever have, they're very approachable. So you can always set up a meeting, either a phone call or a face-to-face meeting. You know, they're very strict with, they don't like personal information. They don't want personal information sent over email. So it was always a conversation for confidentiality reasons. But yeah, they're approachable in that sense. You know, I've never felt that I haven't been listened to. And that's been important to me.
What about looking forward, the next 5 to 10 years? What's something you would love to see Clanmore work to improve or develop going forward?
I would love for them to develop a secondary school, but I think it will be not in time for my son. But they, you know, they opened up the middle school, and it's been a big success. And I would love for them to keep going and see them develop a secondary school.
The Montessori philosophy, is it for everyone?
I think you need to have a good understanding of what it means. For example, if you're wanting your children to come back from school with homework for the evenings, the only time they have homework is when they haven't they want to bring it home because they haven't managed to finish it at school. That often, that often happens because, they really are keen to do it, but they won't be given extra work. Everything that they have is done at school. Another thing, if you want grades, if you want your children graded, if you want them to be doing tests, again, it's not the school for you. The teachers have a very good grasp of how each child is doing, and they take detailed notes. And the lessons are given in very small groups, so they have a really good grasp of what your child is understanding and where that child needs extra help, but they're not tested. So if you want to see tests, then Clanmore isn't the school for you.
Any final words of wisdom for those parents going through that big decision-making process of the school that's right for them?
I think talk to other parents. There are it's a hidden gem. I think it's a hidden gem in in the GTA, and I stumbled across it, and I'm so grateful that I did. And it happens to be just a mile up the road, and my children have been able to cycle to school in the good weather. But yeah, it really is it's a hidden gem.
Sheridan, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.